Hi, I wanted to take you through the grade 8 materials in the History of Social Science framework pretty briefly. There's kind of two main topics happening here in grade 8, which is basically first the emergence of the United States um, and then its growth. So this roughly goes from the American Revolution to 1900. So 1776, 1900. So grade 8 is kind of the long 19th century. And so the main topics are freedom and how that concept changed over time. United States expansion, and you can think of it as expansion in terms of governmentally, geographically, um, population-wise, demographically, and then who is considered an American in all these changes. And so basically it's also going to then end with economic development, the Civil War, Reconstruction, and finally industrialization. So there's kind of three main topics going on here. One is the emergence of a United States government built upon its concept of liberty, which is going to get often used, a proxy word will be freedom. And then how will this country expand, one as a government, and then two as a kind of economic reality, and then finally, so who's a part of it and how does it function? Like, so who are the haves and who are the have-nots in this community? So the first section is the development of American constitutional democracy. I think that's a really poor word, that it's not there's a democratic culture that emerges, but the United States is a constitutional republic. And if you just look at the Constitution itself, it sets up a government where there is some individuals are voted for in different ways. There are elected representatives. And then there are some individuals who aren't voted at all, and that's of Supreme Court justices. So to call it a constitutional democracy, I think, is poorly worded. Democracy means power of the people. The government system of the United States is a republic. And what a republic is where you have a government where representatives make decisions for the people. So you can have a democratized republic, which is what we have, but it's still a republic. Um, but the key points here is why was there an American Revolution? Let's talk about this concept of natural rights, inalienable rights, that people just have rights. You don't have to defend your right to have rights. And then what are the legacies of that American Revolution? So it brings us all the way back to the roots of the American Revolution, things like the Great Awakening or the 7 Years' War, the principles of the revolution and this concept of natural rights. And that's where we get all men are created equal, endowed by the Creator with certain unalienable rights, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Brings us back to the Declaration of Independence, key leaders. But also, grade 8 wants to get into the global context of this, notions of natural rights broadly in the Enlightenment. Also the French Revolution. Also how were Indians a part of the war? How does Haiti become a part, have a revolution? And if you go to major problems in American history, there's even a document from one of the Declaration of Independences from another American country. And so you could kind of look at the cascading out of revolutionary principles. And so what are the legacies? Partly it's governmental. There's the Articles of Confederation and its weak government system. And then finally the Constitution. And it has, along the way, the grade 8 material encourages different assignments, things you could do along the way. The compromises within the Constitution, whether it's small states versus large states or issues of slavery, and then what's the long-term outcome of slavery? How does it affect the nation? How does it affect African Americans? And then finally, the great achievements of the Constitution, that this is grade 8 in public schools. The idea here is to create citizens, people who will want to be a part of the country, who won't want to burn the country down. And so what did it do? It created a republican form of government based on the consent of the governed, establish a government that has survived and continues to survive by balancing all of these powers, and an amendment process that you can alter. It's an alterable document. Then getting into the Bill of Rights, those alterations, to look at those, and then just New America. So now that you have the United States, what will it be like? What will it look like? And so this section looks at one question: how much power will the federal government have? What will the relationship be between the federal government, the states, and the people? How the government changed, this thing called the Louisiana Purchase, which basically doubles the geographical size of the United States. And then what was life like living amidst this? So this first section about the power of the federal government pits Alexander Hamilton versus Thomas Jefferson. You know, the musical Hamilton has a big, huge section on this. What did I miss? What did I miss? The emergence of a two-party system, you know, where you basically had this notion of Hamilton wanting to give the federal government more power, Thomas Jefferson wanting to limit the federal government. That's, you know, to broadly characterize things. Yeah, this historical hedge strategy where you basically create a character and then populate their head with their ideas and perspectives and things like that. Then we get to the Louisiana Purchase, which is fascinating because so Thomas Jefferson is president, but he takes an action that is by far, it expands the power of the federal government dramatically. So you're someone who is opposed to the expansion of federal government power, but takes more action in that regard than anybody else. So Louisiana Purchase and how it affects American society, the economic and social lives of people in the early republic. So that's where we get into things like family life, work, slavery, and then life on the frontier. In the next video, I'm going to go through those kind of issues, but the most important kind of dynamic here is changes of the market economy. And they'll use this phrase market revolution, and historians kind of debate whether there was or not. But the most important thing, the most important shift from kind of 1776 to 1850 is that the idea of being a subsistence farmer, the idea of being localized, completely localized, where you grow your own crops and you take care of your own little community, that largely dies, and that the market takes over. And the market is just the idea that it's a world of buyers and sellers, or sellers and buyers, so that when people grow crops, they're going to eat those crops, but they might also sell those crops. And they're also going to purchase other things. And what happens is we see the rise of a market where people are selling and buying, and so much so that we see the emergence of the New York Stock Exchange, where people start exchanging pieces of companies. And this whole transformation of selling and buying, commodifying everything, transforms how people live. That there's this great mediator between people all of a sudden, and that is capital. That is the marketplace. So what you do is you reduce an item to cash, you know, to a notion of how much it's worth, and then you sell it for that. But the whole thing is these worths are fluctuating. And so that's how you can have a stock exchange where you can say this piece of a company is worth, this piece of paper that has worth for a piece of a company is worth $5 one day, $6 the next day, $2 the next day, and you can be trading all the time. And so the market economy, the important element here is that it transforms how people relate and the system they're working in. That they're, instead of interacting directly, here I'm going to trade you this corn for a horseshoe, right? You kind of corn for horseshoe. It's now corn is worth $1. I have $1. That dollar buys me one horseshoe. A horseshoe is worth $1. Look, I can get the corn for the horseshoe, but I have to go through the buying and selling that is through cash or through capital. So that's just an important shift that we're going to see, and I'll get into that in the next video, and then we'll move forward all the way to 1900.